And for more on the Shohei Ohtani decision, let's bring in the host of TSN Overdrive, Bryan Hayes. And Bryan, let's focus on the fan base here in Toronto because it was a pretty wild 24 hours on Friday with all the speculation leading up to the possibility that Ohtani had decided to sign with the Blue Jays. 24 hours later, we find out now that it's the Los Angeles Dodgers. So how big of a gut punch is this to the Toronto fan base?
Massive one, for sure, Cory, because I think this fan base and collectively the Toronto sports fan base, they're used to these type of scenarios coming up and then not breaking their way. So it is a fan base that I think ultimately is prepared for heartbreak, but that doesn't take away the sting because the buildup over the last 24 hours, like you said, where there were obviously reports, turns out that they were erroneous reports, that Ohtani was either leaning towards the Jays or moving seriously in a direction towards the Jays. And I don't blame fans for dreaming big. I mean, this is the biggest fish in baseball, arguably the biggest fish in pro sports. The idea that he would come up and be a Toronto Blue Jay was going to change everything. So dreams were getting wild, and naturally and totally understandably. That said, 2 weeks ago, this was far-fetched. 2 months ago, it felt like an impossibility. So I think Blue Jay fans, Toronto sports fans will eventually get over this by understanding, just like Kawhi Leonard, just like other superstars that have maybe been attached to either signing or staying in Toronto, when they left, it's like, okay, we've been here before, we'll get over it and we'll move on. But there's no question the last 24 hours were a roller coaster. And if you're a Blue Jay fan in the end, it was a ride that you're not necessarily going to love in the end.
Well, you mentioned Kawhi, and you mentioned that sense of deja vu for the Toronto fan base. If you put this into historical perspective, how big was this with the possibility of getting Ohtani?
I think it would have been even larger than Kawhi Leonard sticking around, because Kawhi had already supplied a championship here, right? Like, this fan base in this market is an off-season market in terms of generally creating the most buzz and allowing your imagination to go the furthest, because there just have not been that many championships here, short of the Raptors in 19, TFC being successful, the Argos being successful. But we know where the Maple Leafs stand in this pecking order in terms of them chasing a championship. So a lot of times you allow yourself as a Toronto sports fan to start thinking about superstars coming here and what that can do in terms of the brand, in terms of how much attention is placed on the marketplace. Let's face it, at times we have an inferiority complex, especially Blue Jay fans and Raptor fans, because it's the only non-American team. Right? And the idea that Shohei Ohtani or Kawhi Leonard or others would choose to come up here as opposed to staying in the U.S. always was a dream that you hope would come true. With Kawhi, it didn't. That was particularly heartbreaking, again, because they had just won. But as big as Kawhi was, he was nowhere close to the superstar that Shohei Ohtani is in terms of what Ohtani represents. Like, truly a unicorn, two-time unanimous MVP. He hits, he pitches, yet he's mysterious, kind of like Kawhi, ironically. But this would have changed everything in terms of how much focus is on the Blue Jays, how great of a player he is, what he brings to the lineup, what he does for the rest of the lineup, how much winning can come with it, how much marketing can come with it, and how much fun you can have just being a Blue Jay fan. Jays fans were dreaming of all of that, and with Ohtani eventually signing in L.A., it goes up in smoke. And it's historically, I don't know if it's as bad as Kawhi, again, because of what he had already represented and because he had already won a championship. But in terms of Blue Jay terms, it's unprecedented. We've never seen anything like it.
Given the criticism that management was under in the way that the season ended in Toronto, what do you think this pursuit has done to either change or maybe even increase that narrative a little bit and bring more criticism on the team?
Well, I'm not sure it's fair necessarily that, Shapiro and Atkins are going to take the blame here, right? Shohei Ohtani is the player who made the decision. The Dodgers gave him $700 million, right? It's not like the Dodgers signed him to a 1 or 2 year deal at cheap money. They gave him a 10-year deal at $700 million. So the Dodgers paid to play here with Shohei Ohtani. We'll never know exactly what the Blue Jays were likely to offer. I'm sure they're going to come out publicly and privately and suggest that they were close and maybe money wasn't an issue. But ultimately, it's meaningless now. Doesn't matter. Shohei Ohtani's not here. So what are you going to do next? Well, you snap out of it if you're in the Blue Jays front office and you realize Juan Soto's in New York, so the Yankees are probably going to bounce back. Baltimore's a really good up-and-coming team that was better than the Jays last year. Tampa's always a thorn in the side of every team in the AL East, and you've got some holes to fill here. So I would expect that they better get cooking here, and I'm sure they will. I'm sure they had a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, but they've got to get into the free agency market. And if that's not going to be applicable to them, they better start working on some trades to improve this team, because the narrative is now disappointment. It was disappointment at the end of the year, and now there's shock in the fan base. People are really going to be rattled that Ohtani's not here. Again, I don't think it's Shapiro and Atkins' fault. $700 million to stay with the Dodgers, but if they want Blue Jays fans to get jacked about the new renovations and get jacked about opening day, they're going to have to add to this roster, and they're going to start selling, and they have to start selling internal improvement, and that this team can and will be a playoff team next year and can and will pursue a World Series in the future.
All right, Bryan Hayes, thanks for this.